Hello everyone. Today I want to take you through a journey woven from 8 small stories, 8 quiet messages a loving father might whisper to a tired heart. We won't rush through them. We'll let each one settle before the next begins, the way light slowly fills a room after a long night. So take a breath, soften your shoulders, and let's begin with the first. The first story begins on an ordinary morning. The kind where you wake already exhausted, already bracing yourself, as though the whole world might fall apart the moment you stop holding it together. But hear this gently: the sun has never needed your hands to rise. The sea has never needed you to keep it within its shore. Even the breath in your chest is a quiet gift, given to you again and again without you asking. So why do you carry the weight of everything as if it were yours alone to bear? You were not made to live in the chains of fear. There is an old image worth remembering here: a gardener trimming away withered branches, not to leave the tree bare, but so it can grow stronger fruit. When life is shaken and the familiar things begin to fall away, it can feel like loss. Yet sometimes what looks like losing is simply space being cleared so something better can be received. You are invited to stop looking at every change through panicked eyes, and instead to trust that your story is still being written with care. From that quiet place of trust, the next story takes us into a moment of almost nothing left. Picture a widow during a long drought, holding only a handful of flour and a little oil, barely enough for one last meal before despair. A traveler asks her to make bread for him first. Every ounce of reason says to keep that last portion for herself. Yet she chooses to give from her emptiness, and in that choice a miracle quietly begins. The flour does not run out. The oil does not run dry. This is the heart of it. Miracles rarely begin when life is overflowing. They begin in the moment a weary soul dares to trust, even when there seems to be nothing left to hold on to. Some doors open only after we loosen our grip on the very last thing we were afraid to release. And as that lesson settles, another voice begins to rise. The voice that tells us we must always stay in control, always calculate, always prepare for the worst. We try to control other people's words, to hold together relationships already breaking, to stay strong long after our strength is gone. But there is a different way. The way of resting. Remember the king who once stood before an army so vast his people trembled, certain there was no escape. Instead of reaching for weapons first, he knelt and said simply, "We do not know what to do, but our eyes are on you." And the answer that came back was that the battle did not belong to him. There are struggles in life that will never be won by sheer effort, only by setting the weight down and learning to be still. Be still and know, true peace was never born from your ability to hold everything together. It is born when you realize you are being held. But the journey does not stop there, because faith asks something even braver: to keep walking when you cannot yet see the road. We so often want to see the whole outcome before we'll allow ourselves to rest. Yet, if every door were already open, it wouldn't be faith at all. Think of an eagle. It cannot soar while it clings tightly to the branch. It only rises when it dares to open its wings into a wind it cannot see. You are the same. As long as you cling to the old and familiar out of fear, your soul stays low to the ground. Sometimes only a small light is given, just enough for the next step, not to leave you in the dark, but to teach you to hold a hand instead of clinging only to the answer. The next moment brings us into the middle of a storm. Imagine your life as a small boat on a vast sea, with violent waves rising and dark clouds gathering, and you running from side to side, trying to keep it from breaking apart. The harder you fight to control it, the more exhausted you become. Then someone steps calmly into the boat, places a hand on your shoulder, and speaks to the waves, "Be still," and the water grows calm. This is the old story of the disciples on a stormy lake, and the quiet truth inside it. Peace doesn't come from your own ability to steady the boat. but from the presence with you inside it. Perfect love has a way of casting out fear, the way light fills a dark room, not by dragging the darkness out piece by piece, but simply by arriving until the shadows fade. And as the storm quiets, another story leads us gently inward to the walls we build around our own hearts. There were times you opened up and were let down, times you hoped and were disappointed, times you waited for an answer and met only silence. So you learned to keep your distance, to keep a backup plan hidden away just in case. That fear is understood and it is never shamed. But here is the tender truth. The same walls that keep the pain out also keep the healing from getting in. Think of Joseph, sold away and forgotten in a prison. Every step seemed like one injustice after another, yet that very place was quietly preparing him for something greater. Think of clay in a potter's hands, pressed and shaped and passed through fire, not to be destroyed, but to become a vessel strong enough to last. The wounds you've carried were never proof that you were abandoned. Often they are the very places where light is meant to shine through. From that healing, the path turns towards something you may have stopped believing about yourself, that you could be chosen. We measure worth by strength, by status, by whatever earns the world's applause. But that has never been how the heart is weighed. Moses trembled at the sound of his own voice. David was only a shepherd boy, overlooked in the fields, while his brothers stood in the spotlight. Gideon was hiding in fear when he was called a mighty warrior, called not for who he was in that moment, but for who he was becoming. Don't despise small beginnings. The smallest seed can grow into a tree where birds find shelter. A single small flame can drive the darkness from a whole room. You are not asked to become someone else to be loved or used. You are only asked in honesty to say, "Here I am." And so we come to the last of our 8 stories, the one about time itself. So often we feel left behind, watching others step into their season, while we wait in a silence that feels endless. But delay is not the same as rejection. A gardener does not pick every fruit on the same morning, because each one has its appointed time. Joseph went from the prison to the palace in a single day, but only after years that shaped him to carry it. Seeds lie hidden in the dark soil, roots stretching deep, long before anything rises above the ground. Even Elijah, after a long drought, kept watching an empty sky until at last a cloud no bigger than a hand appeared, and that small sign announced a coming rain. Your tears in the long nights were never wasted. They were seeds planted in quiet fields. The things that look buried in your life are not always finished. Sometimes they are simply being kept until the right season, when life breaks through and nothing can hold it back. And here, where all 8 stories meet, the larger message becomes clear. Through every one of them runs a single thread. You were never meant to carry the world alone. Whether it's a handful of flour, a battle too big, a storm too wild, a wound too old, or a season that has lasted too long, the invitation is always the same. Loosen your tired hands, lay your fears down, trade the exhausting work of control for the deeper strength of trust. The greatest miracle was never only the changed circumstance. It was the heart that finally learned how to rest. So as you go from here, walk gently, hope quietly, and keep moving forward even when the road is still wrapped in fog, believing that the one who has carried you this far has no intention of letting go now. Not today, not ever. And one day, looking back, you'll understand that not a single tear was wasted, and not a single dark night passed without a more beautiful dawn being prepared on the other side.